Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for this devotional. Today we are in 1 Timothy chapter 6. I'm going to read verses 1 through 2. You know what this means? This means that we're almost to the end of 1 Timothy, which means we have another book coming, and I'll reveal that tomorrow. We're going to the Old Testament next. I think you're going to love the next book. It's fantastic. So the text for today is, "Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants or slaves regard their own masters," that's unbelieving masters, "as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled." So that's one context. Then he says, "Those who have believing masters," so not an unbelieving master, a believing master, "must not be disrespectful on the ground that they are brothers. Rather, they must serve all the better, since those who benefit from their good service are believers and beloved." So, during the time that Paul and Timothy lived, the gospel had a special appeal to a poor segment of society. But in Ephesus, we don't just have poor people here. We have a large segment of the ultra rich. This means that in the church at Ephesus, they had followers who were both rich and owners, or poor or slaves, who would worship together. Now imagine that situation. That had to be fantastic. And this unique socioeconomic dynamic had concern for Paul here. So Paul addresses this tension. This is what leaders do. They address potential issues before they become actual issues, right? That's just good leadership. But the direction that Paul gives Timothy here has some incredible, I think, marketplace applications for us today as believers. I mean, if we apply this direction to our modern context, we learn a lot about how believing employees, that's people like us, should interact in the marketplace with two types of bosses. So first, Paul speaks to the issue of a believer working under the direction of an unbelieving boss. He tells us that we are to regard or to think about them honorably. Now, occasionally this can be a problem for us, right? Especially for bosses who do not believe in God. But as Paul states here, we have to take responsibility for addressing any of our bad thinking, not theirs, that would result in dishonoring them. And we know that from time to time, unbelieving bosses are going to do less than honorable things. They will. But we have to trust that these things will be exposed in God's time. And until then, it's our responsibility to steward how we regard them, because God may use unfortunate events in their life to drive them to Him. Thus, Paul says we always got to be ready by acting honorably to them, so that when the time comes, we can bring attention to God's name and teaching instead of discrediting His name and teaching in that moment. Isn't that incredible advice? It's really profound. Now, second, Paul speaks to the issue of a believer working under the direction of a believing boss. And here we assume that these bosses, they probably are going to church with some of these slaves. But the predicament here is that believers who are employees might try to take advantage of the relationship or generosity of their believing bosses and then use it as leverage to get something or permission to do nothing. Instead, Paul says, don't do that, and then commands them to be very respectful to them. And then he declares that it's an incredible opportunity for two believing people to serve all the better. I love that phrase, all the better, because they share, why? Common values and a common end. You know, fellas, I've often thought about these common values and common end as convergence, the convergence of everything coming together to impact the kingdom. When believers come together and use their time and their talents and their treasure for the greater impact of the kingdom. And I honestly think that there's lots of godly men out there today searching for just that you want to experience the amazement and the blessing of convergence, of men coming together, using their time and talents and treasure for kingdom impact. And I believe it can be found. In fact, I want you to know, I really believe I'm presently blessed to experience this. But this ministry right here is the convergence of me working and using my time and talents and treasures together with you guys that are actually watching today so that we can impact a kingdom of men for God's glory. And guess what? We can do this apart from each other, but if we do it together, something incredible happens. And Paul calls it here that all the better experience, right? It's just all the better. So as believers today, whether you're an employee of an unbelieving boss or a believing boss, I want you to work well. But if you're working for a believer today, then I want to encourage you to work all the better. All right? Get out there and do good work today. I love you guys. I pray this blesses you. If it has, share it with someone else. And I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.